Hey, welcome! This is a Lingo 2 mapmaking tutorial, which uses Godot 4.3 Steamworks. Today I will be introducing the basics of Godot 4.3 as is relevant for Lingo 2 mapmaking. So this is going to be very limited if you're coming here from the larger Godot ecosystem. So first of all, you will want to start off of all the scenes. Well, actually, only I have all these scenes because I have a different version of the repo. You have mini lesson. You will want to start with new template, which is what I have open here. It contains a panel, a door, a world port. It contains all of the stuff here in the side you will need. I'll be making videos about savers. I'll be making videos about panels. I will be covering a lot of these things in other videos. So very quickly, let's get introduced to the Godot milieu in total. So let's introduce you to the different docs. We have the main doc here, which is going to be able to flip between 2D, 3D script, and assetlib, asset library, that is, viewports. And on the bottom of this is going to be connected to the console output, the debugger, audio, which you're not going to use much in Godot. You will only be able to modify this through code anyways. The animation editor, animations are going to be a future thing, and the shader editor, which I may cover in a future video if people start to get more interested in the scripting side of Godot. Alright, so this is going to be our scene tree over here, and it shares a doc by default with the import one, which if I go in here, actually I already have one selected and in colors. So if I have any file, any media file that has been imported into Godot, this will give me options for importing it in different ways. So you probably won't need this until you start to import images into your map, in which case they can be a bit tricky, but this is where that import menu is. So beneath the scene tree, we have the file system, which just shows all of the files that are in the Lingo 2 repo and thus in your project folder. On the right here, we have the node inspector. So if I click on a node here, you will see all the exported variables from the script, which is panel main, from the thing that the panel main is inheriting, which is receiver, from the thing which receiver inherits, which is node 3D, and from the thing that node 3D inherits, which is node. Everything in Godot inherits from node at some point. And then we have the node doc, which is somehow different from the node inspector. It contains the signals and groups that the signals are things that this can send, and the groups are groups that this might be in. In this case, we only ever use player for the player group, and that is the only group that is in Godot. We just use this as a very quick shorthand for determining if a colliding body is the player. Each of these docs can be customized with this little 3 dots in the top right, so I can move the scene over to its own place on the left, instead of being in the same one is import. I like the default setting, and because I make a lot of tutorials, I tend to stick with it because people will be more familiar with that. But I could move it any which way I want, moving a scene tree over here, for example. I could even make the scene tree a floating. So now I have this anywhere on the screen I like, as another window. So I will need to edit out that alt tab. Okay, so if I X that out, that'll just go right back here, and I can move it over. I can also move these just by dragging them between the different docs. But of course, I can't drag this to the left because one doesn't exist there, so the floating menu. Okay. I also over here have the history menu, which is all of my edits, so that I can see what I'm doing and undoing. Let's go back one to the left and go to the inspector here. All right, so the center thing, the 2D viewport, is only ever used for the UI in Lingo 2. You likely won't be using this one much, but in the future, I will be making a tutorial about how to modify the UI, or add new pause menu elements, other stuff like that, in a later tutorial. In the 3D one, it is worth going over all of these tools. The default gizmo, this pointer click, allows you to select different things, it allows you to move them, it allows you to rotate them, and it allows you to scale them. I lied, it doesn't allow you to scale them by default, it seems. I did not mean to... Wow, that's going back through a lot in weird order. Okay. I didn't want the gravity curve here, that's from a previous one. Okay. So, the inspector will show us, I have read over that, 3D viewport. Okay, but each of these is also going to be independently. This is going to be the translate without any of the rotation. This is just the rotation. This is just scaling, so I can make this any size I want. In that case, I kind of made it smaller instead of larger. Okay, let's move back a few steps, make that a normal panel again. This will allow me to select anything that is intersecting with the mouse ray that's going through the screen, so I can select the panel. I can also select the block that's beneath it, which happens to be the floor. So that's useful if you are unable to select the thing that you are looking at because something else, possibly partly invisible, is in front of it. If I lock this node, I am then unable to transform it anymore. So I can select this node, I can, click on all these things. It's not going to show me what I want because it's now locked. Which, it's probably a good thing to lock some things so they aren't accidentally moved. The next to this is going to be the group selected nodes. So this doesn't do anything on well, actually it does because it has children. So this is a subscene. I'll get into that later. I didn't actually mean to do that. I meant to make local. So now, if I were to try to select in the screen any of these, let's actually go to the context menu, it's only ever going to show me the block. Now, if I were to unselect this and go through this, nope. Okay, so the static body doesn't actually have a selector the same way. That's fine. So right now, I have moved the collision. It's hard to see here, but I promise it's actually here. The collision for the block away from the block actually is. So this is where it's visible. This is where its collision is. Apparently, it's not a problem with block.tcsn, so it doesn't really need to be grouped or ungrouped. But when you want to move, actually, you know what? I will make a panel local. That is a much better demonstration. So right now, I want to click on the panel. And I try to move it, and instead, I have only moved one of the meshes that's part of it. If I go up to the panel and I group it, then when I try to lock on this, it'll only select the parent node, which is the panel 2. Normally, the panel 2 has nothing to select it because it's just a node 3D, so I'd always be selecting something under it. In this case, it seems like I'm mostly, well, in that case, I selected the clue. So I might be moving things independently when I only want to move them as a whole. That's what grouping is for. The local space transform. So right now, I am seeing the global coordinates. I am seeing global Z, global X, and global Y here. If I go into local space coordinates, this is now going to show me the rotation of the object. Panels are all rotated by 45 degrees by default. Essentially because all the panels and panel holders were made separate at first, and then when Brenton decided that he was always going to use panel holders for every single panel, with a few exceptions, he actually made them one object. But now he didn't want to change all of the 700 panels that were already in the game, so he rotated the panel holder instead. So this is going to allow me to move within the rotation of the piece, and let me see what its axes are. This is snap to, and so now when I move something, it's going to snap to particular coordinates. If you look at that translation in the bottom left of the viewport, it's going to be moving by 0.25. It usually moves by 1. I've selected 0.25 because I find that better for placing things. You can also enable snap by holding control, as I'm doing right now. Snap is on, so holding control is going to turn it off. But if snap was off, then I could hold control to turn it on instead. Okay. This is going to be my preview of the lighting. So right now I don't actually have directional light in the scene. I'm not going to see this lighting when I load in, but it can be useful, for previewing light or for previewing light, or for making a light that you then want to set in your game, because I can go into this menu and I can change this over here. And, the azimuth and everything. I can change the color, the energy, the max distance to cast shadows. And then I can say add sun to scene if I really want. And that just added this directional light up here, which has all the settings that we just had. So now it's also going to look like this when I move into the game. A lot of the levels in Lingo 2 have directional lights, such as the grate, and a lot of the ones that are inside do not. Okay, then we have transform. This is where I can snap an object to the nearest floor, which is not always useful. I can change how things are going I can specify a transform in here, and I can also configure what my snap is. I need to go pay attention to whatever that doorbell is. And the view menu is going to be where I can change my number of viewpoints. I can also change what stuff is visible in terms of the gizmos, the origin and the grid, in case I don't want to see those, and I have some additional settings for how the camera should work. Now, if I take some multiple viewports, I can now move in these independently and, take different views of things. If I had a camera in the scene, wrong button. If I had a camera in the scene, I could also then preview that camera. And now this camera this viewport is going to be whatever that camera sees. So having multiple viewports might be interesting might be useful when I'm building, because sometimes I want to view things from multiple points, or maybe I'm in a really constrained space and it's easier to select where I'm building from up here, but I'll only see what I'm building down here, something like that. So I'm going to delete this extra camera, and I'm going to go to a single viewport. Now, moving around the viewport is most easily done in fly mode. So that's what I'm doing right now. I'm holding right click, and while I'm holding right click, I can move the mouse to go around. I can press WASD, and Q and E moves up and down, and that will move me like a character who's flying around in a video game. While I have right click held down, I can also use the mouse wheel to control my movement. So right now I'm moving very slow. Right now I'm moving very fast. And I can also hold down Shift as a quick little sprint. When I'm not holding down the mouse button, the mouse wheel instead will control my level of zoom. If I would like to toggle, instead of holding down the right mouse button, I can also press Shift plus F. My mouse cursor disappears, and now I am flying as well. Right click or Shift plus F will cancel out of that. Let's see. You can also use the joysticks in the bottom right. I have not found a way to disable them so far. I find they get in my way more than anything. However, you can use them. If you need to find something quickly in the scene, you can hit it and then press Ctrl plus F to focus in on it. How far it focuses depends on what your zoom is. So right now my focus is not going to be terribly useful. If I'm zoomed way in, it will help me find something much better. So let's go to something else in the scene. Are these all in the same spot? They are all in the same spot. Cool. But this is going to help me, discover what's in my scene, the focusing. Okay. Lingo 2 largely uses grid maps to build walls and stuff. I do not recommend it in general for video games. They're not a great method of blocking out. They're not very efficient, and there's a lot of problems with grid makers, with making maps. However, Brenton, the maker of Lingo and Lingo 2, really likes grid maps because it means he can build like Minecraft. So if I select something from the right menu here, I can hold left click to paint, I can hold right click to delete, and that includes walls here. I can hold Ctrl click to select the block at that point, so I don't need to always be going back and forth to the menu. I can change the axis I'm working on with Z, which will go to this axis here. Now I can build vertically. X will give me back to the default, and C will get me to the other axis. So now I have created this monstrosity of a 3D sculpture. If I want to clear this all away, now I can start to go into selection. So pressing Shift and holding left click. Well, I'm still holding left click. I can hold Ctrl plus mouse wheel to change the height of my selection, which will then change the height of the second corner, or Shift plus E is what I prefer. Ctrl F will fill a selection. Okay. Delete will delete a selection, and Ctrl C will allow me to copy it. Now, I want to copy this, but I don't really have any room to move about, and if I hit right click, it's going to cancel. So what I can do is I can Shift F to fly, and let's up my fly speed, and now I can move around. Shift F brings me back, and now I can place this where I want on the level that I want. Boom, now I've copied my wonderful, horrible 3D sculpture. And I have also rotated it. I did that by accident, but that was also something I wanted to show. So let's make a selection again. So if I hit A, that's going to rotate around that axis. S is around the y-axis, and D is going to be around the y-axis. So that's how I can rotate selections, and that's useful for doing stuff really quickly. Okay. The next part. Resources. They're an important thing to get into. Resources are a way of saving memory and computation in Godot, and they bundle like things together. So right now I have a resource within this script, which is the pedestal material. Materials, meshes, audio files, images, they're scripts even. A lot of things in Godot are going to be resources, and everywhere you use the same resource, it's going to be the same resource. So it's not great to show that on a panel because they load in at game start. So let's copy the floor. This has the same mesh as something else. So if I go into this mesh, I can't modify it because this has been this is part of something else. I need to make unique before I can modify it, but that will also mean that it's separate from the other one. So that's not really going to help me here, but the surface material override is something that I can modify, and it's a shared resource. It is the material, which is the color and shininess and other properties of this floor here. So if I change this color, it's going to change everything that uses that same resource, because I'm not changing the floor's color, I'm changing the color of the material that the floor uses. So I can change this to a different material, like say just a red medium, and now this will be changed separate from changing that one down there. Or if I go back to these having the same material, I could also make unique this material. This now has a copy of that material, and so I can change this independently. This is also the process that we abuse in order to make custom map making able to give custom resources to the end player, because make unique also packs in that resource with your .tscn file. That's text scene file, which is the default for the thing that that Godot scenes save into. You can also save them as .scn, which will be in binary, which is already much smaller, and might also be compressed again, which would be much, much smaller. So .scn is useful for a lot of things, but you cannot modify it in a text editor, which I will be covering in a future video. So you need to pack in all of your resources in order to ship the custom resources with your map. You need to make your resources unique if you want to change one but not the other. So I've already shown you the inspector here. The inspector is where I'll be modifying all of the exported variables from the script that is on this node. So the exported variables are stuff like clue, symbol, and answer for panel. Panel main inherits from receiver, so it also has sender group nested complete at. It also inherits from node 3D, which means that it is visible in the thing. And so if I look at meshes here, mesh is just a node. It is not a node 3D. It does not have a transform. If I go up to scene and I decide to make everything in scene shift to the right, you're going to notice that everything under the meshes here didn't shift with the rest of the scene. That's because meshes is a node instead of a node 3D. If I change that type to node 3D, now it's going to move with the rest of it because it can inherit its parent's transform. And so block can inherit its parent's transform. But because that's not the way it's done by default, it doesn't normally go with the entire scene. I do not recommend modifying your entire scene like that. There's no reason to. But, you know, this is why some of your children might not always move with their parents. Okay. So, basic Godot nodes are going to be brought in from add child node here, or also Control A. I have search for node 3. This is all the nodes that are available, and you can click under node 3D. This is going to be all of your 3D nodes right here. You can go up in the Godot docs and find out what each of these is meant for. You are also going to see some nodes in here like receiver.gd, because everything that is a class in Godot is also going to be loaded as a type of node. However, this isn't going to work correctly if I try to take in a panel main. So panel main, it has the script, it's the right type of node, but a panel here is also a subscene, as we can see from these things here. So for subscenes, instead, I'm going to want to instantiate a child scene, or Control-Shift-A, and now I can click on panel main, and I will be loading a proper panel. And this one is actually a subscene. So if I go over to panel main here, that one is just the panel node, and it doesn't actually work. If I try to load this in right now, it should crash. Let's wait for that crash. It crashes because it cannot get mesh, because it cannot get the hinge quad, because this doesn't have any hinge quad that's part of it. This panel I brought in that was instantiated does. So let's talk about these things for a bit. This means that something is visible or not. This means that something has a script attached to it, and this is going to be the same script for every node that uses panel.gd. So if you modify this script, this will modify every single node that uses that script. Down here at the very bottom of the inspector is where you would make unique if you want to change that script and only that script. And now it no longer has a name because it's going to be saving as part of the as part of the map, as part of the scene file. This little clapboard here means that something is actually a subscene. So I can click on this clapboard and we'll open the subscene. So now I can see everything that is under a proper panel. If I go back to new template here, I can also make local, which now, instead of saving as a subscene and trying to reference a file that might not exist in the game, it's going to reference all of these things. Okay, because it's now it's going to save all of these with the map. Now, panel 1 is part of default Godot, so the panel.tcsn is included in the game files. There's no need for you to make your panels local unless you want to change something beneath one of the panels, in which case you'll need to make stuff local recursively in order to ship your custom meshes, or resources, or scripts, or other stuff. Okay. And this one here means that something's part of group. There is also an additional one, which you aren't going to see by default, which is when a signal is saved. So I'm just going to do this to the player. So we do all of our signal connections in Godot, in Lingo 2 inside of the code, because it's more convenient for a number of reasons with the way we use signals. If you want to do them in editor, you could do them from this menu. This is now connecting. Every time this emits the signal sound effects on success, it will be playing the function on panel 1 SFX in the player node. I am going to delete that because I don't want to do that. Oh, but well, I had that done. The reason I was showing that to you, this now shows another symbol here, which means that there is a signal from this node. Okay, let's see. What else have I done? I've done exported variables, I've done inspectors. I will be making a future tutorial on packing stuff with your map, so don't worry that I haven't really explained making unique and all the problems that come with that. If you want to save your panels, you will need the saver panels at the bottom of your map due to loading timing. It needs to be at the bottom of your scene in order to work correctly. That's not quite true, but let's go with it for now. I will be making a future video tutorializing savers, but for now understand that the default saver is going to try to save as panels all of the grandchildren of panels. So room 2 and room 1 and room 2 here doesn't really care about them. Everything under room 1 is going to be tried to saved as a panel. If one of those is not a panel and it does not contain the trigger and untrigger signal, and it does not contain the is complete property, it's not going to save. If it has those, it's going to save regardless of whether or not it's a panel. Like I said, I will be covering those more in a future tutorial. So this has been your very, very quick whirlwind tour of Godot 4.3 Steamworks.